Okay, guys, if you want, we can start. And I wish to give the word first to Gaurav. If you wish Gaurav to begin because you wanted to give us a little introduction, I don't know, maybe present things from your point of view. You're doing Vedic astrology, something that most of us are not very familiar with, but that's a great chance to learn and to see whether there are some common points between the systems.
You want me to give the presentation right away, or shall we? It would be better if we run down through it a bit. Get into it a little bit,
Mhm.
and then I guess it would be better to present things.
Okay, I don't know what you are preparing for today,
Well,
so.
I would be talking about three different type of house systems: a whole house sign system,
Mhm.
which I guess. Astro Swati, I guess, just mentioned.
Yes.
And then I would be, giving a brief about the Kaspal chart system. And then there is another chart system that is called the KP chart system, the Krishnamurti Paddhati chart system, somewhat similar to the Placidius house system.
Okay.
So it's
Well,
going to be a very brief presentation.
yeah, of course. Yes, I just wanted to start from somewhere. Everything is very improvised, so we don't really need to, begin in a different
Fine, we
way.
can we can
You
we
can
can
you can
start with
start
it.
straight away and discuss the few ones that you have picked up and the ones you want to share with us, and then some of others can share their experience. And I think most of us here should know what the the essence of the topic is, how we divide the chart into the different sectors that we call houses and the different systems that can be used by this. It's more mathematical, astronomical, this question. Every astrologer usually needs to make this personal decision about which house system to use, as there is no common rule and no authority there to say specifically which any one of them is better than the other. But there are astronomically and psychologically, philosophically, different ideas behind why the houses are being divided in this way that each one of those systems proposes. And I, for example, use the Campana system. I'm very influenced by the work of Dane Woodyer, and this was his preferred system. But it's not just because of that. It just makes sense to me why we use that type of quadrant system to calculate the houses. So I would later on maybe mention a few things about that one. But I also use Placidus. Uh, Thanks to Lauren recently exploring the equal house as well and seeing, I mean, things can be valid there as well for my particular chart. So yeah, I just leave it on you, each one of you, to express your opinion or to say how you have compared them and experimented with them and what results you have seen. And we can, yeah, touch on the theory as well as we go along, if you want.
All right. First of all, I would thank you very much that you have given me this opportunity to give a small presentation. But I would also, kind of apologizing in advance if I am, kind of making few mistakes in terminologies, mentioning few things in equivalent to the Western astrology, because I'm not too very good in the Western system of astrology. But yes, when we are talking about Indian astrology or Vedic astrology or Hindu astrology, they are more or less the same things. And even the Vedic system of astrology is more or less similar to the Western system. They are both kind of different sides to the same coin. So the coin is the same. It is not, falling way apart. So now you were talking about the different kind of house systems. Talking about them mathematically, I'm not going to go into the detail of what is the mathematics behind that, how they are calculated, but I would stick to the practicality of it, how they can be used while predicting an event. Another thing which is important here is that while we study a chart, we use all these different charts, consecutively. It is not that we use one single chart at one point of time. We use every chart. It is mentioned in our classics that there is a system to analyze a chart step by step to reach to the final conclusions. Now, maybe I'll start presenting my slides so that will give you a better idea of it.
Yeah.
So I'm sharing my screen. Uh, Fine. Okay, we're going to discuss the whole house sign charts. Then we are going to also discuss the cuspal chart system, and we are going to discuss the KP cuspal chart system, which is almost similar to the Placidius system of calculation. There may be few variations how you may be doing it, and the Vedic system, the way it is mentioned in the Vedic system. So basically, we are going to discuss these three different type of charts that having different type of house systems and their applications in predictive astrology. So, okay, coming to the chart. Now, I'm not so very good with the circular Western charts because we here cast square charts, but I have tried my best to give you an outlook of here. So, okay, let's assume that this is an Aries ascendant rising at 20 degrees. In that case, the middle of a house, which is 15 degrees, is not aligned with the zodiac and at 20 degrees. Now, since you can see here, this would be somewhere the middle of the house, and we can see that this ascendant is at 20 degrees. It is at 20 degrees rising. So a 5-degree portion has, it's accreted in the 12th house, which is 15 degrees, is not aligned with the zodiac at 20 degrees. Since the zodiac has passed 5 degrees off the center alignment of the first house, therefore, the earlier surpassed Aries zodiac, 5 degrees in duration, would accrete in the 12th house. As you can see here, this is the Aries zodiac, not the house. The houses are, defined by the black lines. I have made them more prominent so you can understand how and where is the house. And you can see that this zodiac sign has passed somewhat to the 12th house. Now, therefore, the earlier surpassed Aries zodiac, 5 degrees in duration, would accrete in the 12th house. Consequently, Taurus zodiac would also prevail 5 degrees in the first house or the ascendant. As you can see, this green that is being represented by, for the Taurus zodiac sign, it has kind of somewhat accreted in the first house itself. This accretion of zodiac in different houses in a chart is called Bhava Chalit or a Kaspal chart. Bhava meaning houses and Chalit meaning movement. Comparative to this Bhava Madhya or a whole house sign system, it assumes that the entire first house has only sign Aries. So what is the whole sign house system that is in Vedic? Regardless of this Aries being accreted in the 12th house, they considered that this whole house has the impact of Aries zodiac sign, regardless of accretion of Taurus at the ending degrees of the first house. So comparative to this Bhava Madhya or whole house sign system assumes that the entire first house has only sign Aries and second house Taurus and so on. Overlapping of zodiac sign over other houses is not considered. So we are discussing about that the accretion of this Aries in the 12th, accretion of this Taurus in this first house is not considered in the whole house sign system. It is considered that this first house is entirely Aries, the second house is entirely Taurus, and so on, for whatever be the degrees of the ascendant. Overlapping of the zodiac sign over other house is not considered. The sign and the house are deemed synonymous. I hope this is not confusing. I hope I am able to clearly differentiate between the bhava, the Kaspal chart, and the whole house system chart.
Yes, I
Right?
think
I'm gonna present the more. This next slide will make it more clearer. Now let's assume, okay, this is the same ascendant with 20 degrees, Aries ascendant in the first house at 20 degrees. We know that the zodiac length is 30 degrees. The duration of a zodiac is 30 degrees. It's not going to change. But since the center, the middle of the house, that is going to be 15 degrees and we have the ascendant at 20 degrees. This has kind of, overlap the 12th house. It has accreted in the 12th house, the 5 degrees that has accreted here. And eventually the 5 degrees also have accreted in the first house for Taurus. Taurus has accreted in the first house. Now, let's assume that Sun originally is in Aries in a whole house sign chart. Sun is in Aries at 3 degrees. So in a whole house system, regardless of accretion of the Aries in the 12th house, it will still be considered in the first house. But in a cuspal chart, this same planet at 3 degrees in Aries would be considered in the 12th house, not in the first house. So that is the main difference. That is how the planets will move, shift. In a cuspal chart, the sun will shift, being on 3 degrees, it will move to the 12th house. But in a whole house sign chart, it will still remain in the first house itself. Now I will explain the third kind of chart, the KP cuspal chart. In a KP cuspal chart, similar to Placidius house system, the ascendant degrees are taken as starting point of the first house. Regardless of whatever is the degree of the ascendant, it can be 5, it can be 10, 20, whatever. So that is the starting of the first house. That is how it is considered. In a KP cuspal chart, the ascendant degrees are taken as starting point of the first house and starting of the first cusp. Since at various points in the sky, zodiacs tend to shorten up from an observer's perspective, which is taken account for mathematically depending on location of the observer. One may observe in a chart that few zodiacs may entirely disappear from a house. Like as, let's say that this is Aries. Now Aries is, I mean, it could be any degree starting from anywhere, since you can see that house is, house usually is starting here. But we have a different variation of degrees in the Aries ascendant. It could be anything. That is where the first house will start. Ascendant and house cusp at 5 degrees. Let's say this is this is a Aries ascendant at 5 degrees, but we will assume that this is where the first house will start. Reason being, the disappearing zodiacs may fall in the middle of the house, neither at its starting and ending before the next house. Now, if you see closely, what is happening with the Taurus sign here, that it is kind of hemmed between the Gemini and the Aries zodiac sign, even before, the starting of the first house and ending of the second house. In this example, Taurus has shrunk up, neither starting at the second house. Now we can see that Aries is overlapping over the second house. So we will assume that this house has Aries zodiac sign. The first house also has Aries as the ruling zodiac sign, and the second house also has Aries as a ruling zodiac sign. But since Taurus is ending earlier, it is not going to be considered. It kind of disappears in the middle of it. In this example, Taurus has shrunk up, neither starting at the second house nor ending at the third house. So in this case, Taurus will be a disappearing sign from the chart. And if Taurus has a planet, that planet would be considered to be in Aries sign, which would fall for both the first house and the entire second house of the KP cuspal chart. Now, why do we have this disappearing sign? I'm going to just give a very, a layman kind of a slide. If this is the observer on the horizon, we see half of the horizon, half of the sky at one time. So from an observer's point of view, if we are watching the 12 signs, since we know that Earth is kind of, oval in shape, it's not circular like a ball. And from an observer's point of view, the sky stretches at different angles. So the angle of viewing of every zodiac sign would be different. So that is why at some angles, sometimes, and there is a mathematical calculation to it. I'm not going to go into that. I already mentioned that. So these are this is showing variation in view of angles of a zodiac sign from an observer's point of view. Now we know the whole house sign chart. Now we know the KP chart. we know the cuspal chart and the KP cuspal chart. Now, what is its application in a in a practical way? So I'm going to give an example further. So let's say in a whole house sign chart, a planet is in the ascendant, but in a cuspal chart, that planet moves to the 12th house. Then it can be easily explained with an example of a tenant who has full authority over the house he lives in, no matter his lease may be about to expire in coming days. Similar to a planet in initial degrees in a sign in the ascendant, but the ascendant in the lasting degrees, just like the expiring lease of this tenant. Since the ascendant is about to, end, no matter what, even if the ascendant is, ending, but the planet in that zodiac sign, which is falling in the ascendant in a whole house sign chart, that will still be considered there. Hence, regardless of the initial degrees of the planet and the lasting degrees of a sign in the ascendant, the planet has full occupancy of the first house in a whole house sign chart, just like this tenant. So it has a full authority of giving all the positive and negative results of whatever it is, whatever the sign be. Moving on to the results of the cuspal chart, but in a cuspal chart, the planet in an initial degrees in a sign may move to a previous house, like we saw in the cuspal chart. If Sun was in Aries at 3 degrees and the ascendant was at 5 degrees, so the Sun was to be considered in the 12th house. So, but in a cuspal chart, the planets in initial degrees in a sign may move to the previous house if ascendant is at ending degrees. Or let's say this planet X moves to the 12th house in such a case. Correlating this with the tenant factor in this case, the tenant has already moved to the other place. But as the planet still remains in the sign of the ascendant in a whole house chart, this can be considered as a tenant in transition of shifting his house, but still having keys to both houses, having a double occupancy with full authority. So in that case, in the original whole house sign chart, since the planet is being considered in the first house, it will give an impact of the first house itself and that zodiac sign. But since in the cuspal chart, it moves to the 12th house, being because of the variation of because of the earlier degrees of the planet, then it is also going to give impact, its impact in the 12th house, and in that house it kind of showing double occupancy. But the initial occupancy is the first house, but the second occupancy is of the 12th house. And lastly, now what happens when we have a disappearing sign in the KP cuspal chart? Lastly, the KP cuspal chart, now this is kind of tricky, since the planet in the disappearing sign may fall in a previous or a later sign depending upon the degrees of the planet. Relating it to the tenant factor, it is a condition like the tenant is homeless due to sudden cancellation of lease because of any X factor, but is provided shelter by a friend or a relative. In this case, the disappearing sign is of importance as it directly indicates trouble with the associated sign, but more emphasis is to be given for the sign falling in the two houses. Because let me go back to the KP cuspal thing. Because let's assume there was a planet in the Taurus zodiac sign. Now, since we know that this sign has disappeared in the KP cuspal chart, it will eventually be transferred to the Aries zodiac sign. And since Aries has occupancy of the two houses, two different houses. Now, first of all, what is important here is that the planet has lost its original occupancy of the Taurus zodiac sign. So it will give you, kind of results like the cancellation of the lease of this tenant all of a sudden. But what is even more important is that this Taurus zodiac sign in itself, whatever it represents in the natural horoscope and as a zodiac sign, when it is disappearing, it is gonna diminish the results of this zodiac sign will be kind of disappearing from the horoscope, which is not a good thing. If any of the zodiac signs is missing from the KP cuspal chart, that simply means that the result of that zodiac sign are gonna be missed entirely. And the zodiac sign, which is overlapping over the two houses, like in this case, the first house and the next house, it will have a huge impact over the entire chart. So this is how there is a variation in the whole house system. Now, how do we correlate all this? We initially consider the whole house system as the primary system, but to fine tune our predictions, we use the Kaspal chart as well, which is a secondary chart. But KP, the Krishnamurti Paddhati system, is entirely a different concept that I have learned. It is again a Vedic system, and that is something we have been. I also use it along with everything what I when I consider predicting for a chart. But they all work in harmony with each other. They are consecutive in nature. It is not that you can just pick up any out of it. Just you cannot assess only the chart by Kaspal chart. You have to go back to the whole chart first. Then only you can assess the Kaspal chart. So that is how I will wrap it up. Thank you for listening to me. That I hope I made some sense. I was not being a moron.
Oh, come on. Thank you so much, Gaurav. I was very interested in a few things you said, especially about the disappearing sign. And if you allow me to sum up a little bit based on what you said about the Western way of looking into the systems, there is so much overlap. I think we all noticed. So you started from the whole science system. Maybe Tsveti can tell us a bit about it as well while we're still there. Would you like guys to start from the equal house and the whole sign systems, as these are considered the most ancient, the most basic, and the most simplified systems? And we can then expand on the next. There are usually, correct me if I'm wrong, two types of systems in Western astrology, and lots of different kinds of each one of them. But we are either concentrating on the zodiac, which is what mostly the equal house and the whole sign systems are about, or we are taking into account both the horizon and the meridian, or the four angles of the chart, and we are constructing what is called a quadrant chart, and Placidus, Campanus, and many others are based on this type of division, where we actually either taking the space factor or the time factor. I will explain about this a bit later more. We divide actually the space around the person at the moment of the birth, considering all the 4 points of that form the quadrants of the chart. So starting from the equal house and the whole sign systems, these are based mostly on the zodiac, as what we're projecting to divide the chart into is the ecliptic or the zodiac. So this has, I think, a complete overlap with the way you in Vedic astrology do it with whole signs. Is that right, Treti?
Practically one sign is one house. This is how it is, and I really like using the whole sign system, especially when I do career and vocational readings, because then we have the MC. It's a floating degree, it can fall into the 8th, and it can fall in the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th or 12th house, and it would be giving us additional information on the vocation and life purpose of the person. So I don't like the Placidus house system, for example, because it always puts the MC on the 10th house, and sometimes it can be different. And from the readings I have made so far, I come to realize that when I do readings for people who are really young and don't really somehow are not so aware of their chart, they're not so conscious about life, maybe the Placidus system works better for them. I don't know why this is just an observation I mentioned, but yeah, and with age the whole sign system comes to be really working, really working. But for younger people, I use the Placidus as a second house system as well, because
we'll touch on the Placidus so we don't confuse ourselves at the moment with the comparisons yet. Let's a little bit say about a little bit more about the whole sign system, how it works, what this is all about. So as Gaurav mentioned, and I think it's the same principle, that wherever we have the ascendant in the zodiac by degree, we fixate on the sign of the zodiac where the ascendant starts, regardless of what degree that is. It could be the very start of, let's say, Aquarius, or it could be somewhere within the 30 degrees that each one of the zodiac signs is having. So once we determine the ascendant sign, then that is considered in the whole sign system to be the whole first house. So if any degree of Aquarius is the ascendant, then we consider the whole first house to be covering exactly the whole 30 degrees of Aquarius. And
Yeah.
then Pisces becomes the second house, Aries the third, and so on and so forth. So we have a complete overlap here between the zodiac degrees and the houses. And we are just using the point of the ascendant, the rising sign, the rising degree at the moment of birth, to as a starting point. But this starting point is so zodiac concentrating. And the zodiac is this background, imaginary background. We're talking about the tropical zodiac here, not the sidereal, not the constellations, but the actual path of the sun during the year, the way we see it from the point of view of the Earth. And this is the rotation of the Earth actually around the sun in the year. And this path that it forms is called the ecliptic. And the other name for the ecliptic is the zodiac. So the zodiac, the ecliptic, for those of you that don't know, is the same thing. So this house system is really concentrating, looking on, splitting the ecliptic into equal 30-degree sections, and saying when we consider houses in the chart, with the areas of life where things are going to be happening, the circumstantial factors in the life of the person, these will be based on the zodiac. But here is one, I mean, the difference why some people like that system and why others don't that much, I guess, has a lot to do with the fact that the zodiac was the main point of reference, as important as it is, more in old traditional astrology, when things were more, how can I say, as Roger very often says, the tribal astrology or the vitalistic astrology, where people were living in groups, they were more concentrating on survival, on agriculture, on everyday, following of the movements of the bodies in the sky, so that they can regulate their natural life. Nothing was yet very individuated. So the zodiac was the primal factor, the primal thing out there that we were using. They were using in astrology. And so in this system, the zodiac rules. If you like that, if you identify with that, I mean, obviously, it's always dangerous if we try to very, very strictly apply rules and ideas and meanings that were valid 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and the way people lived then, and what was important for their lifetime, with today. Today things have changed a little bit. Astrology has changed. It's become more individuated. So that's one of the reasons why these other systems that are having different logic behind them have also come forward, offering a different way to answer for ourselves the question, what are the houses all about? Because actually, what we're discussing today is not which house system has the most votes or is the most reliable for predicting things, or because we are mostly thinking about, I think, among us, about psychological stuff, psychological astrology, and the way we can get explanation, perspective, guidance through astrology for all sorts of decision making, not necessarily to predict things or to try to predict things. But if we are trying to predict anything, so talking about, say, horary astrology, or these branches of astrology where this is sought as, answers of particular questions, then maybe this system, the whole house, and the other one, the equal house system, which I guess Lauren can tell us a little bit about next. They could be probably the best because they're so simplified. You have a sign of the zodiac and you've got the same thing going on in the house. If Taurus starts on the ascendant, Taurus is going to be the whole first house, and it's so much easier to project and to apply all those other angles and calculations of aspects inside the chart, to use the predictive techniques. So now, what is the difference between the whole house system and the equal house system? I think there is a lot of confusion about this because many people think they're the same, or are wondering why are, I mean, what's the difference? Would you like me to explain it, or would you like to
Yes.
explain it yourself, Lauren?
No, I'd like you to explain it because from
Right.
what I've heard so far, I can't understand when they're saying, yes, it starts here and it's exactly that amount
Mhm.
of 30 degrees from the point of the ascendant to, let's say, that same point at the end. How is that different?
Well,
Yes.
to me, this whole sign system, the one that Gaurav started from and now Tracy discussed, is a little strange because it is, say, the ascendant is, say, in the 15th degree of Gemini, for example. Then we
Hmm.
actually include from the very start of Gemini, from 0 degrees, from the first degree, we include that in the first house already. Because the ascendant happened to fall somewhere in Gemini. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. Well, with the equal house system, the one that you prefer, what we have
Mm-hmm.
is we are much more careful about the degree of the ascendant. So the degree of the ascendant
Okay, I
now
get it.
matters. So if we are going back to our example of 15th degree of Gemini, then this is going to be the actual start of the first house. Yeah, and then the start
Yes,
of the second house will be the same degree of the next sign. So the 15th
yes,
degree of Cancer. Then the 15th degree of Leo will be the third house, and so on. So this same degree is what stays the same throughout the whole sequence of houses and signs. But what's common between them is that they're both concentrating on the zodiac. It's still, whatever is the starts in the first house, one whole 30-degree section, which is what a zodiac sign takes, is within one house. So both of those systems
yes,
include exactly 30 degrees in every house, right?
yes, yes. Good, that's good. That was a good explanation. Thank you.
You're welcome. So why do you prefer the equal house, and how did you come about using it?
Well, first, I just want to say I take the equal house system when I do a chart. Then I also do a complete Sabian symbol. So that's my second analysis. And then the third one is using intuitive skills that I was trained in. So I think that is also that you take your strengths as an astrologer, as a person, and you find the system that brings forth your strengths. So in the end, I love it because I wrote it up so I could be concise. In the end, I love it because I can relate to it in a fractal type of way. With everything I apply, I'm so into sacred geometry, also to Native American work. Every day I do Native American directional work, and also in the ancient Hebrew tradition of which I'm part, the geometry there and the archangels and so forth that go along the directional signs. So this then equal house somehow is very satisfying to me. To me, it's based on numbers, and I can relate to that. And when I meditate on it, I feel the most resonant with it. And then I've also found that the information applies to myself and clients. Searching online, I found a woman, her name was Elsa in the North European area, who has been a practitioner for decades and applied over the years different house methodologies and something like 40 years. And she, through practical application, never found a system that corresponded so well for herself and clients over the years as equal houses. So I love the symmetry. I feel astrology is a mathematical construct, a fractal construct. So that's what equal houses complements. I think in the end, it's a preference as to what makes sense to the practitioner as they go forward. I think important thing is simply to understand what are the criteria for creating, for example, the Placidus circumponus or the various ways to divide the houses. When I think of ancient knowings, I feel the most resonant with the equal house, like wheels upon wheels upon wheels. And that relates more to my Hebrew background. There was a woman named Ann Whitaker, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to do the keynote.
Anne Whitaker is a very, very good astrologer from the UK. I think she's Scottish.
Okay, yes, there you go. And she did a class experiment. They worked their way around everyone in a small group discussing how interpretations might change, and most importantly, how much that mattered by potentially altering the emphasis on key horoscope themes. This was just one example in which whatever shift we saw of planets from one house to another, there was invariably an underlying theme in the birth chart, so that the emphasis being slightly shifted in one context made little, if any, difference to the overall accuracy of interpretation of the whole horoscope. The students could see from our small experiment something that is fundamental to the accurate reading of any horoscope. Strong themes will shine through whatever way you divide up the circle. Another astrologer, Robin Heath, observed astrology appears more and more to behave like a hologram. You can perform almost any technique with the data, turn the chart inside out or slice it up, and still the symbolic pictures remain. Both this statement and our class experiment bore out the conclusion to which I arrived. It really doesn't matter which system you use, you get the same overall picture. And that made me want to tell everybody I always also then do the Sabian symbols for all the planets and the ascendant, and that also tunes me in. So then there's a person, there's a Phoebe Wise in her excellent book, Inside the Cosmic Mind, and that's why she decided to return to the equal house system. So Phoebe Wise, W-Y-S-S, and a book called Inside the Cosmic Mind. She described it as a top-down art, the practice of which reveals that we are expressing in micro form the shifting macro patterns of the whole cosmos. Archetypal astrology is an approach to astrological chart interpretations based on a cosmological view. The meanings of the chart factors, such as zodiac signs, are divided. Anyway, and there another person was mentioned was Richard Tarnas and other pioneers. And then there's this woman, I'll just read the last part. From the symbolic geometric perspective, dividing the inner space of the horoscope symbolically into 12 equal parts seems more appropriate than using any other house system. So then Elsa wrote, I use equal, not whole houses. And she said she switched to equal houses about, her name is, I just know elsa.com. I think she's either from Sweden or Finland, and I feel funny that I can't remember, but sorry. I switched to equal houses about 15 years ago after testing them against Placidus extensively for 6 or 7 years. She was, there's a astrologer named J.G. Jacobs. I think it's Jayj, last name Jacobs. He's deceased now, but I really enjoyed his work. She weighs things, but I eventually found herself favoring the equal house system. And she doesn't like it that people say use whatever works for you, but she's going with the equal house system. So she said, she switched to it because all the years of testing, people, hours and hours and hours and hours of poring over not my own chart, but the charts of many hundreds of people, she she has found that that the one that doesn't fail for her in interpretation is the equal houses. So that being said, I came upon this. It was my first system. Maybe the coach was, maybe it was slightly different, but it works for me. And when I combine it with the Sabian symbols and I combine it with my training as an intuitive, it gives good results.
Okay, Lauren, when you say good results, and also about the lady that you quoted, do you know if she's using the simple predictive techniques, or is it more for counseling, psychological counseling? Do you know what she specializes in?
I think it's everything. I think it's predictive and psychological.
I see. All right. Well, I honestly believe that what you said about the connection between who and what we are as a person, as an astrologer, is so related to the house system that we choose. And I was like, that's what's making it work. In these cases, come our way, in the spiritual class. And so I did something to it. So that every single system could be leading the same result at the end. I think fundamentally, what we need to distinguish today, hopefully, between them is this concentration on the zodiac against balancing out the zodiac plus the houses as a space factor. So the space factor means dividing the space around the person when they're born, in the place when they're born, into equal sections, and then mixing that up with the zodiac, with the ecliptic division. That's what distorts the rest of the house systems, and they're not equal like that one. They're not having exactly correspondence between them. So I guess if we want to use just one of the frames of reference as a main one, which is the zodiac, we can get amazing results. Maybe just things will be slightly incomplete if we want to expand in one degree forward in terms of the ability. The way I see it is the ability of every one person to work individually with their energies in their chart, to direct in a conscious way what you're going to do with the chart you're born with, and how you're going to express it. I think when we use the quadrant systems, the other systems that we now are going to start talking about, are having these different sizes of the houses in them, regardless of what method we use, which one we use. There are distortions there, especially when we go to the north or to the south of the globe. Most of the systems are not very also, even if the logic behind it is quite good, because they have this amazing distortion when they go north and south. And what happens is the house becomes extremely small.
This is all distorted. This, your sound is.
My sound is bad again?
Yeah, that almost a very long time, and I just want to mention it so other people are aware that she's in London, and it's the internet comes and goes. So
yeah, I'm sorry about this. Maybe I should.
So important.
Let's give the word to someone else because I think you have probably better connection than me at the moment. Would you like to, Dwayne, for example? Would you like to share something with us on this whole thing?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. I like Gaurav did a little presentation.
Go ahead with it.
I'd be happy to share that. I'd also like to be able to see some people while I'm speaking. So when I do that, it blocks out some of the text. So if you would be kind enough once again to read some of the text when I ask you,
yeah, no
that'd be
problem.
great. Okay, thank you.
As long as my sound is good enough to be able to do that, my connection. But
oh, right. Well, we'll work it out. Whatever.
Yes. Let's try.
Okay. So share screen, and here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Whoop. Something's happened here. I'm not sure what's
I can
happened.
see your shared screen.
Are you seeing the Zoom? It says Zoom when dialogue. No, don't want that. Okay, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm definitely a student of Rudyard, and I'm not an astrologer per se. I'm a person who has embraced astrology over many years as a tool to explore my own unconscious and to in seeking integration and whoops and the greater life. Okay, here we go.
I'm going to mute everybody apart from you, Dwayne, because I think we've got some background noise.
Okay.
Yeah, you can
So
start now.
Okay, thank you. As Redlina has pointed out, Rudyard uses or recommends the Campanus house system, and it took me a number of years exploring different house systems to finally settle in on this is my preferred house system as well. And it really has a lot to do with, as Redlina introduced, the different, it takes us out of the zodiac and into the quadrant system. So this is a little pamphlet that Rudyard put out in 1973. And he makes the point, any teaching about astrology should start with the question, why do you want to learn astrology? What do you expect it will bring you? And to what use are you planning to put your knowledge? So he's really calling us to what is our basic orientation to these tools, this language, the symbolic language. And as a young person at that time, I really found a lot of guidance in his orientation. It really, I was at the point of aspiring to self-actualization. It really was an urgent feeling within me, and I was very fortunate that a lot of the needs. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. A lot of my basic needs were satisfied, and I had this sense of a greater life, out beyond, that really had to do with me actualizing my individuality. Well, Rudyard was exactly the right person to encounter at that time in my life, because he really, as any of you who've studied him know, he really takes us into the great beyond. And a quote from him, living a life of self-actualization and transcendent development is the most arduous process there is. It is today our only hope for a humanistic future and a social order founded upon qualitative values and upon the freedom, which actually means allegiance to and commitment to spiritual values. Well, for me as a young man in 1972, this was all a ginormous adventure in consciousness. It just, I was inflamed with desire to read as much of him as I could and absorb as much as I could and really get on with the adventure. As has been pointed out, and if you wouldn't mind reading this, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
How is the sound, first of all?
Good here.
Okay, great. So it's a shift from zodiacs to houses. As many letters had come to me from people who had become extremely disturbed by some astrologers' analysis of the good and bad points in their charts and by irresponsible predictions, I became forcibly aware of the psychological danger involved in careless astrological statements about birth charts. I therefore tried to stress the psychological responsibility of the practitioner and to develop theoretically a consistent approach to those astrological factors which were more particularly related to the individuality and the potentiality of growth of the person whose chart was being studied. I increasingly emphasized the need to take a holistic approach to the birth chart and to stress the houses as much, if not more, than the zodiacal signs. The shift of emphasis from the zodiac to the houses seemed to be particularly significant and indeed essential after Cyril Fagan promoted the sidereal zodiac, giving to what has been the traditional basis of astrological interpretation an even more ambiguous character.
Thank you. So this debate between the two zodiacs, or at least the two zodiacs, was really flaming at the time of my early studies, and it generated a lot of confusion, as he indicates. But over the years, I've come to understand the zodiac in a new way, and this notion of multiple zodiacs, it's really a matter of choice and application. There are, of course, other zodiacs. So we need to realize there are these symbolic domains, and it really is a choice that we're making about whether we enter that domain and use the tools and within it or not. But we want to stay consistent to the frame of reference that we've adopted. And if we start mixing up our frames of reference, it can generate a lot of confusion. Radlina, please.
Seen in such a light, the zodiac, well, I must have said, this is from Alan Leo now, a quote. Seen
The
in
first
such
quote is Alan Leo. The second quote is Rudyard.
I think I'm not seeing the whole, okay, yes, I needed to move the windows. Right, so starting with Alan Leo, the zodiac that we use is really the Earth's aura, says Alan Leo. And then the quote from Rudyard, seen in such a light, the zodiac represents the cosmic, or rather planetary, environment of man. This environment, for an individual, constitutes the potentiality of immensely vast types of relationship which mankind as a whole can experience. It is a genetic and collective factor. It can also be spoken of, perhaps more literally than most people might think, as a kind of placenta for the embryonic earth body. The placenta is the formative area, the area from and through which the building life energies of the universal macrocosm feed and vitalize the planetary microcosm, the Earth's biosphere.
Thank you. So the placenta for the embryonic earth body, that's quite a rich metaphor. So the whole approach that I was embracing at that time was this notion of the person-centered astrology, which Rudyard was really a pioneer of. He was really emphasizing the individual factor. Sun in Aries, you know, he was really breaking trail. When I speak of a person-centered astrology, I refer to a kind of astrology and to the type of astrological tools which can be used to assist the individual to stand consciously and deliberately at the center of a great mandala, his own particular universe. While the sun and all that refers to the zodiac may be very important and basic, it need not be the one essential frame of reference in a person-centered astrology. It is the three-dimensional space structure which every individual person carries around himself wherever he goes, at least where he stands on a solid surface, that should be considered his fixed frame of reference. So he's making a very strong stand here for the importance of the house system. And this is basically the quadrant notion, which is in my experience of medicine wheels here in North America, it really resonates for me as a choice of house system, because this is the essential nature of it, is that you're acknowledging the space that surrounds you, and the zenith is important, very important in that. The vertical axis. Another Rudyard quote: "In order to reach to the stars as an individual, free from the collective past of the human race, one must first of all be centered. The individualized consciousness of a man has to be established and steady at the center of a vast mandala, his universe. It is truly his individual universe. It is a universe with which he can directly communicate and of which he can learn to decipher the great message of his birth. Birth at a particular time at a definite point of the Earth's surface. His center. He should be able, sooner or later, to communicate without intermediaries from his center to the cosmic center most people call God." The traveler always carries his horizon with him, and the zenith always exists directly above his head. So this is the chart form that Rudyard developed, and he explains the symbology this way. The form that stands at the center of this chart is symbolical rather than a reference to astronomical facts. It suggests that the person whose birth chart it is lives on the surface of the globe, yet in some manner has his roots at the very core of the earth, where all men commune. The standing figure is the Egyptian anciated cross, symbol of man. The center of the mandala is in the region of man's heart. It is there that horizontal and vertical cross each other. It is for every person the center of his or her universe. So really concentrating on this notion of centeredness, yet in some manner has his roots at the very core of the earth, where all men commune. This brings up the notion of sympathetic resonance. If you have a centered awareness, if your consciousness has a very focused centeredness to it, it puts you in the place of being able to come into sympathetic resonance with other whole systems, other centered constellations. And I refer here to Jose Arguelles, who Rudyard regarded very highly as an avatar of the New Age, an Aquarian avatar. And his book, Earth Ascending, is all about resonance between whole systems. And that this resonant factor to our consciousness can facilitate journeying out and beyond just the normal confines of day-to-day living. Very shamanic orientation, but it is fundamentally based on this notion of resonance. This is from that book, Earth Ascending. There are 50 maps of consciousness like this. And if we look into this, we see shamanism at the core. So there's our individuality, our centered time-space capsule. And then there are all these domains of knowledge And we see astrology, astronomy, physics grouped together as representative of celestial sciences. And the notion is very much one of integration of multiple systems of knowledge back to a shamanic core. So this is the, in a more scientific view of the Campanus chart. And Redlina, if you would read again, please.
Yes, of course. I need to move the windows as well, as they are obstructing some of the text. But yeah, now it's fine. Okay. How is my sound, by the way? I'm just concerned it may break.
Good.
Down. Good. Okay. Only a chart in which the center is occupied by the person living on the Earth's surface and the horizon and meridian are exactly perpendicular can be considered a mandala for the individual to use as a form of guidance in the process of self-holing and of conscious emergence from the mass vibrations of human nature. The typical European continental chart, which is now finding a number of devotees in the US, is not a mandala for the purpose of individual integration and self-actualization, because its structural pattern does not refer to the direct visual relationship of the individual to his personal universe. It may, but does not always, use a horizontal line to represent the ascendant-descendant axis. Only in relatively infrequent instances is the meridian line, linking the midheaven and IC, perpendicular to the horizon. It is a distorted mandala which must equally deviate an intuitive perception of the whole person-centered pattern. What such a zodiacally circumscribed chart form does, what such a zodiacally circumscribed chart form does, is to emphasize collective rather than individual factors. It gives them a permanent, unchangeable, absolutely fundamental value and power. It emphasizes the power of the environment and of human nature over the person attempting to actualize to the full of his birth potential.
Thank you. And again, please.
Yes. There are other systems, particularly the so-called equal houses, which takes only the horizon into consideration and divides the two hemispheres created by this horizon into 6 houses, each of which contains the same number of zodiacal degrees. This system is, in my opinion, totally undefensible because it does not take into consideration the fact that both the vertical and the horizontal axes are absolutely necessary to the interpretation of human existence. Using only the horizon as a frame of reference today is the equivalent of considering lying down the only significant position of man.
Thank you. Once again, I would affirm that depending on which house system you choose, it's important to work within the limitations of that system. And in doing so, you will get results. Just as Lauren has shown, in her experience, the equal house system has been very effective. It blends with other talents she has. And I think that's really important here. Rudyard is definitely making the case for Campanus at the exclusion of other ones, but it's a choice. Just wanted to share that. I came across this chart. It's an original Rudyard interpretation for Elvis. But again, using that particular chart form, which is very evocative of this whole notion of individuality and centeredness and our common humanity, which he keeps at the center as a focal issue to remain aware of. So thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Great presentation as always.
Well, thank you.
This was a very good way to explain to others, and maybe to those here that are not familiar with Roger's work that much, where we are starting from in our thinking of the comparison of the houses. Yes, I'm prejudiced in this respect the same way, because I've been through this material and wanted to very quickly share my screen with you guys to show you.
May I just comment before you do that?
Yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
I just want to say that after that presentation, and because I feel like I am exactly that same individual, and all my spiritual work, I'm always tuning to the earth, like that's the Native American thing. And certainly you have made the argument that I absolutely must gravitate to this other system, because it at least give it a wholehearted try, because I am always feeling this individual manifestation, that the vertical is equal to the horizontal. So thank you. That was a very powerful introduction that will cause me to now begin that work.
Yes.
Wow.
And I noticed that looking at things this way that Dwayne presented, the system, it seems like we find out symmetry here as well. Like the equal houses, you pointed out, Lauren, has this apparent symmetry of it, of equal distribution degrees. Here we got another constantly.
We're not hearing you. At least I'm not. Is anyone else having a sound problem?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Who else wants to comment?
I'd like to make a comment just about, I've seen that term meridian before, but I had never put it into any kind of perspective. It had never been explained before. So I feel like I understand a little better. I don't know if Dwayne could maybe elaborate just to hear more about the meridian or an application in a chart or something like that. Do you have any comments about that, Dwayne, about the, because then that makes it more of the orb. Am I understanding it correctly?
I'm sorry, I missed that. That makes it
an orb, O-R-B, as
Oh.
opposed to what you're like saying, like lying flat. It makes it an orb. It makes
Yeah.
it global. That's the function of the meridian then.
exactly. Yeah.
And then I guess I guess I want a little more perspective in that, or either like how it's calculated or something, because that's fascinating. That just opened my mind up.
As far as the calculating, I'm not sure. I mean, we're all using computers these days. And you just
No. Maybe what I'm asking more is the application. How does that apply, like in different than the MC or the IC? How would you interpret the meridian in a chart? I guess if that makes any sense.
I'm thinking that what it's introducing here that's so important is the verticality, the vertical factor.
Yeah.
Along with Rudyard's descriptions of this house system, you'll come across his notion that at the zenith points to a star for each one of us. And without that vertical orientation, you don't have that sense at all. And it definitely opens up, as Lauren is experiencing directly here, even while we're dialoguing, this vertical factor is really, really important. Now, that's what's going to take you out and beyond the Saturnian limitations of your current worldview, whatever that is. And this is the individuating factor that is so important in all of Rudyard's work.
Well, considering I have Saturn at natally 24 Cap, I appreciate that. And I've always, I feel like you just gave me that piece about the astrology chart. about like how we connect in with our star, you know, that there really is something tangible about that in an astrological chart where you can see, yes, that's that person's star, so to speak. Am I understanding that correctly then?
Yeah, rings true for me. Other people.
Yeah.
I also, can I say one more thing? That beautiful diagram at the center of his book, My View of Astrology by Dane Rudger, that is such an amazing, it's the seal of Solomon with the seed of life from the flower of life with the path of Venus in the center of the heart. I noticed the top word was loom. I didn't understand the Latin underneath. What does that say underneath? Which would be light.
Per ignum ad lucem.
Lucem. Okay. I mean, I'll have to look that up. But anyway,
I've been meaning to do that myself.
And that, you know, that in itself is the holographic creation symbol, and the seal of Solomon and the path of Venus in the center, you know, or the signs of the archangel. So with the 5-pointed star inside the 6-pointed star, it's, even though we see it flat, it is so dimensional to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know how the sound is, but I just remembered something which, forgive me, Dwayne, if you already mentioned this, maybe I missed it, but Roger was saying that this component system, which, just to clarify, calculates the horizon and then the meridian, and only after that, because these are like two fixed vertical and horizontal axes, after that splits the houses into, you know, some logic, which we can touch on, that this could be the basis for a future creation of a 3-dimensional model of a birth chart that still doesn't exist. But maybe in the future we can have a sphere, not a 2-dimensional circle on a piece of paper or on a screen that we look at. But more complete.
Breaking up again.
We can't understand.
All right, I'll shut up. Yeah, I'm not allowed to speak today.
I'm thinking Stephen has something to say.
Yes.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Yes, I reviewed the material. I'm not able to make presentations on the screen, but I certainly would like to share some thoughts. And first of all, to point out that there's underlying bias within this particular group of conversations, particularly with Rudjar. And in that particular regard, the individuating process of human-centered astrology. Now, in this particular regard, I'd like to go back to what Lauren was mentioning about the fractal consideration, and that looking at this 2-dimensional layout of a chart is basically a 3-dimensional constellation within a time-space continuum. And this was one of the things that was striking me about the house systems, is that if we look at it collectively from the idea of the nature of light itself, and that nice person was able to do that translation of the Latin, from the fire brings the light, the idea of the particle wave. So how do we separate time and space? However, this mathematical thing of slicing meat and bologna to make a sandwich, something's always lost. So the idea, is a person going to make a time emphasis or a space emphasis? Now, what's striking me about individuation is that within this 21st century environment that we live in, time is down to exactitudes. We can get down to nanoseconds. So the idea now of a person's birth time being very verified, and looking at that as the primary indicator of the person as the particle of light rather than the wave. But the particle still has to move with the wave. But the idea of, we know that all waves have peak and troughs. So for myself, I have a personal disposition to be disinclined to both equal and whole house signs, because they make strict definitions. I can look up in the sky at a rainbow and the colors are not distinct. They move into each other. And in terms of this individuation of growth process, it's like a house is like, here we are between 8:30, 9:30, 10:30, 11:30. We have hours within the day, but they overlap. So I look at, from using the Rudyard point of view and the Sabian symbols, it's the point of the degrees at the Sabian symbols that really make the distinction of the quality within the house. And the overlapping part, okay, I use basically Placidus, and so I have a bit of my ascendant goes into my 12th house, but I don't look at that as diminishing the quality of my first house. Like if I did an equal or whole sign and put everything in my first house just because that's where my sun sign is. But I look at the idea that there's some subtleties that move across the borders. And in this particular regard, when I present material for individuals, I will take the Sabian symbol for the calculated house position. So if I did like an equal house position, say, okay, when I have on my first house, say, okay, let's say I'm Gemini, 26. So I say, well, if I would do that on all the house cusp, I'm putting a bias on those other houses just based upon the sun position. But from what Dwayne was pointing out, from the point of view of the observer, meaning the primary participant, there's going to be a distortion which is intrinsic to living on the planet itself. Now, if we were using sidereal zodiac, there is no moon. Right? There's no moon. But in talking in previous, it's like, well, the lunation cycles are very important for people. Much in the same way as the tropic, you say, well, the seasons and the precessions, yes, but we live on the planet. And I look at this much in the same way as in the Chinese astrology, which Brain mentioned just briefly, the idea of the early and the late kingdom. Because if you take the quadrants, the same thing, the Chinese look at the quadrants, we have the Bakwa, and you're going to have your north-south meridian, and say, well, in the pre-heaven, you're going to have heaven and earth. But in the post-heaven, it's like, well, no, we're going to be more tropical, and we're going to have Kan and Li, fire and water, because we live on the particular planet. Now, from my particular point of view, following what Dwayne was pointing out, yes, in those early 70s, I was attracted to astrology for my sense of personal growth. And now one of the things about Rudyard, he takes individuation and self-actualization to the point of what do I do next? And this is the transpersonal development, which I see is very significant. And this is why, again, it's like, what's going to be the emphasis? Is it going to be a time or is it going to be a space? And I want to have them working both together. And in this particular regard, I feel the disposition for, a quadrant perspective, because I want to be able to grow beyond my own individuation. Now, from getting back to, let's say, the Vedic astrology, and just say the Vedas itself from the septenary model, we can easily see that in terms of these densities of plane, physical plane, astral as far as the water, ether, and then mental as far as an air ether. But then we move to the nirvanic plane, and now we're in the first cosmic ether. Well, from the nirvanic plane, people says, okay, fine, I've reached enlightenment. Okay, now what? What do I do now? Well, the next subplane after that is the paranirvanic. And this is where the Buddha really does the work, because the individual is now existing in a non-dualistic framework. And one of the things about astrology in terms of predictive factors and rather than personal growth factors is this factor of prediction takes precedence over cosmic intentionality. And getting back to the idea of the centeredness, this presupposes that a person is already centered in the first place. And the very fact that they have to learn astrology, at least for themselves, indicates that they don't have a center at all. Now, I know there's a lot of people who don't know astrology, but they know their sun sign. And if they have a pair of car keys, they might have a little figurine that says Leo on it. Well, I know I'm a Leo. So we all know that if we don't have a time of birth on an individual, say, well, what am I going to use? So generally, you say, okay, use use the sun sign as that determination of the first house, as the ascendant. First house determines the sun sign. Why? Because the individual's consciousness is only solar oriented. But when we have an exactitude of time, and this is why what we were talking about last week about progressions, is that none of these progressions really work well if a person doesn't have the right time of birth. It goes off on these varying tangents to somewhere else. Now, in this particular regard, some of the distinctions between since the planet's being round and this elliptic thing, again, one of the problems with whatever system is that this whole thing was designed in the temperate zone. So, you know, they got these higher elevations there. When we get these distortions, then everything gets screwed up. So I said, okay, fine, I'll equal it out, because no one had mentioned about the top centric.
Yeah, could you explain about that one?
Well, the top centric, see, it was it was developed to make up the corrective factors to where if we get too high north or too high south, that there is no the elliptic doesn't meet the horizon. It's just off in space because we're right up there at the top of the world. But the idea here now is which system is a person going to have function with. Now, I can't remember the person's name. She was the new one, talking about using the whole or the equal house systems in terms of vocational counseling.
Yeah,
now I know that for myself. I know for myself, living in the modern world, what I wanted to do with my life isn't how my life ended up. So the idea now of like an individuation process seems to be more important to an individual relevant, because where is the growth and the direction of my life? And in that particular regard, I'd like to have a house system that is suggestive of ambiguity rather than exactitude. And that's the irony of astrology, because astrology wants to mimic astronomy and physics as being an exactitude of numbers. And to me, once a person starts talking about an exactitude of numbers, it's really a projection of an undeveloped sense of mental consciousness that the orbits of the planets are elliptical and not circular. How did that go in those earlier days? Well, the God-created universe wouldn't make crooked circles. It would be perfect because God's mind is perfect. So then we project that onto the system of understanding ourselves without being able to transcend our own sense of personality. Now, those are the thoughts that I wanted to share. What I have with what particular system to have a preference, I'll say just like my English language, you know, born in the USA, you know, I'm a Placidus kind of a guy. If I was born in let's say, in Europe, I might have been disposed as a cock. But the idea now of why the particular disposition of Rudyard having the Campanus over the Placidus, I have an ambiguity. Well, it's time versus space. And it's like, I really would like to have a better understanding of how was it that Rudyard came to his personality disposition to choose the Campanus over the Placidus. And I'll just stop there.
It's exactly what you said, Stephen, I think, that he preferred the space factor against the time factor in division of...
Okay, all right, because that's what I kind of thought, but I wasn't really sure.
Well, eventually he says to be the center of our own universe, we need to divide the space around the new regarding the position in the Earth's surface where they are, because the Placidus, as far as I know, the Placidus system uses the same reference point for everyone. Did you lose my...
Except for the person's latitude and longitude of their birth. Now, if we go back to the Babylonian times, regular folks didn't have any natal charts at all. But the king was the chart of the nation. And basically the king was the only one who had an individual chart.
Yes.
But now we are all royalty in the manifestation of life on the planet. Each one of us have that angelic ascension available, as far as what, you know, Lauren was pointing out as well.
Yeah.
So the idea for me is like, I still like to think of this quality of light thing is like the exactitude of time to look at, again, time over space, because I exist in time. I'm born at a time in space.
Mm-hmm.
I look at time preceding space in terms of, let's say, an operational perspective.
Yes, yes. Just to clarify something, so the Placidus system divides the houses between inside each other. So from the ascendant to the IC, then from the IC to the descendant, and so on, by dividing those all those three houses equally time-wise. So it's a time-based system. So the time it takes the Earth to rotate around its axis in one day. So that period between the sun reaching the ascendant to the sun reaching the noon point, which is the IC, we divide that in equal spaces of time, let's say. And that's how we get to the Placidus system. But with the system, what we are dividing is actually the actual real space, physical space around the person. So I think Rudyard probably was, the way I understand it, trying to say that we project our experiences on the environment rather than the other way around. So we project our qualities and energies, the ones that we have as positions of planets in zodiacal signs in the chart, on the houses. So basically our life happens through the perspective of the houses in those areas of life, in those mentions, as he calls them, the houses, and we affect the circumstances rather than, I think he had a saying, maybe Dwayne knows exactly what it is, but it was something like that. It's not that events happen to people, but people happen to events. So that the moment we encounter a situation, our individual factor of how to respond to that situation is the more important one than the actual circumstances. The circumstances are like a backdrop, like a reference point in which a frame in which we are existing. And this frame is the houses. So the houses is like we have the space around it, and then we see in that equal 30-degree sections how much of the zodiac, when we look then at the background of the zodiac, that's not exactly overlapping because of the elliptical curve. It's a little bit crooked, isn't it? It's not exactly horizontal. So that's why some houses contain more zodiacal degrees, while others contain less. About this difference in the sizes of the houses. Yeah. And
Thanks for explaining that.
yeah, it's a bit technical probably this, but I think it's really important to imagine if you want to explore. There are very good. So in this article here, this article on Codia is where Rudyard goes into more detail about the meaning of the houses, the real philosophical idea of why they should be considered the way we just discussed. And he's talking about the difference between the way in Europe and in the United States it was most common to Okay, does anyone else want to take it from here, because I think my sound is gone again? Any other comments, guys? Can you
I just
still
want to
hear
say
me?
my experience of the campanist orientation, I really like being able to go outside and experience the moon in its different phases. And I especially like looking west at sunset and seeing Venus and the moon coming together and so on. And if I can locate myself with my birth chart in mind and look through that lens, it adds that much more. You know, like it really counts where you are situated on the planet and how you're looking out into space. And the notion of, I don't know if it's called, is it the most exalted planet? I mean, there's different criteria maybe for that sense of exaltation, but if a moon in the 10th house, which is what I have, I mean, that seems to be something that I can actually experience. I can go out and experience the moon locating to my 10th house. And there's something very empowering in that kind of experience. And just as an example of what it's like to go out and experience, well, for example, this comet that's coming through right now, Neowise. I had the extraordinary experience of going out into the wild here. I live remotely, and at least annually, I go out for a sleepover in Mother Nature. And I never know exactly where I'm going to end up, but on this particular journey, I ended up with a magnificent orientation to the comet, which I hadn't anticipated. And I managed to get a picture, and that was one of the slides that I showed there. But I must say that connecting one-to-one, to actually resonating with the presence of that comet was hugely empowering to me. I came away from it just really so full, like I'd been charged by this encounter. And I really want to encourage that kind of orientation. Oh.
Which is how we can experience the meridian and the horizon together, isn't it, Dwayne? Which I think we maybe repeating a bit, but that's exactly what these house systems, especially Campanus, because there are a few others which are similar, have in mind there as a basic philosophy, that both of these axes are important, and we need to have the cross. The symbology of the cross is also very strong here, of the two axes crossing each other, and how powerful those magnetic points of the four angles then become when a planet or some important point is close to them in the chart. Like, for example, I have a moon on the descendant exactly on the same degree as the descendant. And this really makes a difference, I believe, and would make it a completely different story, a different interpretation, if we're looking at other house systems that would not account for this exact position, or we'll just basically say what house it is in, a different house, the 7th house or the 6th house, and that's not going to be able to allow me to extract the meaning of that crucial planet on an angle that otherwise may just be lost in the sea of other factors. I want to show you something. I don't know if you know this. I found it this week. In this website, you can enter there is a very good tool. You can enter your birth data. So that's the cafeastrology.com website. And you can enter your birth data, and it gives you all of those house systems, where your planets are going to fall, in which house, comparatively, between the systems.
Fabulous.
So that's such a great way to see what the differences may be if you use different systems for your own chart or somebody else's chart. And it also has a table with the cusps, which is great. So for example, Campanus here is giving me all the cusps the way I'm familiar with them. And the cusps are those degrees of the zodiac, and that's something I really agree on with Stephen, with Dwayne, with everybody else that was talking about this, how important it is, what degree of the zodiac, and we can now refer to the Sabian symbols as well, every one of the houses starts at. As these beginnings of the houses are also magnetic points, also concentration points of I think, stronger influence of anything that's around them. And we can see in this table how I have different house cusps in the different systems. So that will obviously affect the interpretation. But when we go back to the Sabian symbols, I have been exploring them a lot, and I identify a lot more with those degrees of the cusps of the houses that are given by especially Placidus and Campanus, in my particular case, than in other systems. So I can really make the connection also to the Sabian symbol, and how one Sabian symbol sounds to me or feels to me a lot less relevant to be the real one, the true one, than another. But that's obviously a guess at the end of the day. We can never know for sure. Yeah, but just to experiment with it.
Would you speak a bit about the Koch house system, because that's the one that I've always used, and I feel like for me that explains my chart better than the Placidus.
Okay.
But I haven't experimented with the one you're talking about, the campus one yet, so I'm looking forward to that. But if you would explain a little more how the Koch is different, I'd appreciate it.
So I'm not 100% familiar technically, but I know that it was established by a German physicist. And Stephen mentioned it's more popular in Europe, but I always thought, maybe I'm wrong, that it was more popular in the States, this particular system, that it's more common. I have heard that in the States, most astrologers are using it. Maybe we can check that. But what was interesting to me was that Stephen Arroyo prefers that system. I haven't used it a lot. I haven't experimented, but I love Arroyo's work. So I thought he may have a good, and he's a student, a very avid student and a follower of Rudyard as well. So here we've got somebody that, is a very active promoter of Rudyard's ideas, but he doesn't use the same system that Rudyard proposes. He uses this one, Koch. And I found a very good article, if you guys go into the houses, by this lady in Skyscript Astrology. So it's not, let me see, what was the author exactly? So that's a very detailed article going through many different systems, including that one, Laura. And she's also explaining how it's calculated, in what way it may be more accurate. Let me see. So yeah, Deborah Holding. I think Deborah Holding is an astrologer that has some books published as well. It's a familiar name, even though I've got nothing from her. So she's got this article in Skyscript, skyscript.co.uk. I just Googled it. So I was looking for the different house systems, and this is one of the first results you're going to get in Google if you try her. And so I don't remember exactly where she was. There was something interesting about the Koch system. If anyone knows, you can intervene.
Well, if I can comment, you're talking about the comparison between the different house systems. And if I understand it correctly, in part, it's the elliptical component that really does give a little bit of that variability. And I think the sense of the art and science of it, but with that variability comes the art of intuition and what resonates. So maybe by doing some of that, the comparison of the house systems, just kind of maybe I wonder, if we would get like little psychic hits, like, oh, there's the resonance, one way or another. Just an application for using the comparison, that's all.
Yes, for that reason, maybe it's worth reading a little bit here. It's very short. It says that, yes, actually, Stephen is popular in Europe system. It says here, it's currently very popular in Europe, particularly with the Eberton and Huber schools. So the Koch system is generally accepted as being of modern development. So that's one of the new ones, introduced in the 1960s by the German astrologer Dr. Walter Koch. And it says that Koch uses projection of the ascendant to formulate the intermediate house cusp. So the ascendant is the most important factor, obviously, in that system as a point of reference. And then it's a division of the ecliptic. So I've read that some of the systems divide the ecliptic, which is the belt. Sorry? I think somebody's mic is probably on, and yeah, something's going on anyway. So yeah, some of those systems maybe everyone can explore in their own time the technicalities behind them, because that would be probably too much for the moment. Somebody divide the ecliptic into based on my sound is gone again.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Well, it's interesting because I was mentioning the ecliptic earlier, and so this is kind of pointing that out. Is that the vertex? I was looking at the astral gold, and I didn't see the meridian. Is that the vertex? Is that the same, different term for the same thing? Do you guys know?
What same thing? What to what? Different term to what?
In the astral gold, I was trying to find the meridian on my chart, and it didn't come up. But what it did have was the vertex, VERTEX, and I'm just wondering if that's alluding to the same thing. If anybody knows that.
As far as I know, the vertex is related to another way of looking at the descendant, not the meridian. Is that right?
Oh, okay.
Is that correct?
But who knows?
I think it's some sort of another eastern point, but I'm not really sure. It's like an alternative eastern point. It's meant to be the, or was it western point? I think vaguely remember it was related more to the horizon axis, not to the meridian. But correct me if I'm wrong.
I've got the
So many
root
details.
encyclopedia here on that.
Oh, great.
Meridian, from the Latin medius, which means middle, and dies, meaning day. The great circle specific to a given locality on the Earth's surface that is perpendicular to the horizon, intersecting at its north and south points, and passes through the zenith and nadir, or nadir.
So what we get from that, I guess, is that the meridian is always perpendicular to the horizon. Yeah. So once we fix the horizon line, the meridian is always positioned exactly on that particular perpendicular line. Well, so I think this graph here might be from that same article, might be helpful to illustrate it. How the equator of the Earth doesn't correspond to the ecliptic. You see, the ecliptic is that ellipse here, which is the rotation of the Earth around its own axis. And here we've got the number 2 and number 4 are the two perpendicular points to 1 and 3. So that's basically the horizon and the meridian of that particular locality. Let's say if we. And we mentioned, I think, in Mike Erie's book, the one that I talked about last time, there is this first part of it that's got all those different graphs and illustrations, astronomical illustrations of what is what in astrology and what are the frames of reference, how we calculate things. So he talks about the celestial sphere and the ecliptic, the meridian, all those terms. I think you can really learn from that book if you're interested.
May I ask, in this chart that's right there on the screen,
Mm-hmm.
we've got the locality of the observer with this heavy star, and then we've got the ascendant as the number 1. So is there any relationship to the ecliptic to that locality of the observer? I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out, the meaning of where the locality of the observer is in this particular diagram. Is that random or is that specific?
I'm not really sure, to be honest, because I haven't spent that much time studying it, but seems like the ecliptic is a fixed, I think it's a fixed positioning on the wheel, on the sphere, and then it's just from the point of view of that locality of the observer.
Okay.
I think, Lauren, the 4 points are, corresponding to the locality, but the 4 points may be different if we move that point, that star, to another place.
That's what my question was, yeah.
What do you guys think? Because I'm not really sure I'm correct here. If you interpret it in a different way.
I like seeing it, but I don't have much to say.
Okay. Well, we can. I've seen better diagrams of this. It's just this happens to be part of the article, so I thought,
Yes,
yeah.
it's helpful to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I was also thinking in Dwayne's presentation and in combination of everybody's presentation of how when we meditate and we go to the sacred space of our hearts, from the inside world, you are vertical and horizontal and spherical, and you bring your auric out to the, whatever, 55 feet around your body. As you move in your consciousness, that's the sacred geometry footage. And it wouldn't matter where I was on the earth, in my own centeredness of being, my spirit is being fed from the earth, from the sky, into the center of my heart. And when I close my eyes, it wouldn't matter where I was or if I was taking my last breath on earth. There's a certain kind of, in the self-realization of self-actualization, where the self of your heart becomes the center. I don't know how that relates, but that somehow occurred to me. That it's not on the outside at all. It's in the inside that you reach for infinity, but you also have your boundaries of your sphere.
Mm-hmm. It's like the stamp that this first moment of birth puts on us in relation to the spatial factor, the houses, and the signs of the zodiac, and then you kind of carry this through your life as a code, as a mandala, as Rudyard calls the birth chart a mandala. But it will only be able to be a mandala if we divide it in that particular way into 4 sectors with the meridian and horizon parallel to each other, and eventually explore it from the Jungian perspective as well. Jung really liked working with mandalas, and I think you can find so many overlaps here of that concept and Jungian psychology. By the way, Roger was a very avid reader of Jung and very influenced by Jung, as he constantly mentions his work in his writings. So I think a lot of that mandala association and symbol here has to do with it. And it may be worth looking into the astrological houses book by Rudyard, where he explains this in more detail. And at the end of the book, there is an overview of the 4 angles of the chart, which is what meridian horizon again brings us back to. And in many different places, this idea of the axis of power and the axis of consciousness, I think, is something really powerful. The axis of power is the meridian axis, and the axis of consciousness is the ascendant-descendant axis. So especially when you have a birth chart where things are accumulated around one of those 4 angles or in one side of the chart, say everything is very much around the NC, or the MC and the IC. There are many charts where there is an accentuation on certain areas. We already looked at those patterns in the charts. And if that's the case, this axis of power, the meridian axis, is very, very determining the circumstances of the life of that person and the themes they're going to be dealing with in their life. Which is going to be a lot more to do with fighting for and fighting against the world and other people and things to be achieved than about realizing and internally figuring out different things, which is more to do with the axis of consciousness. So this is a very big topic on its own. I mean, we can maybe one time we can look at the 4 angles of the chart in more detail, one by one, and see the meanings of that. But that all is extracted from that initial decision we make to look at the chart, first of all, as projection of these 4 points. The cross of incarnation, was it? That Roger is calling it.
I was wondering if is Gaurav still here?
Yes.
Yes.
No?
I wanted to ask you, in your house presentation, you westernized it to the circle. Could we also see it in the Vedic form that you would present it to a person in the square?
Well, I have not made the presentation in a square way. I'm sorry.
But do you
But
work in the square way normally?
yes, I can show you a square chart. Most of the time, whenever I am teaching at the university, we are always using square charts. Just give me a moment. I'll show you a square chart. It's very, very easy to
Yeah.
relate to.
Gaurav, while you're looking for the square chart, can I mention something here which I think is relevant?
Sure.
I was reading this week again in Rudyard's Astrological Houses how in the Vedic system, I'm not a specialist, but he was mentioning that how in older types of Western astrology and at the same time in Vedic astrology, there is this big accent on a quadrality. Was it like looking into things in first of all as a polarity? Yin yang, first dividing something into two halves, then dividing into four, then dividing into eight. So this division in two, and then spreading into the different subdivisions by two, is very common for that more archaic or traditional style, because there everything is more based on polarity, on the principles of polarity. While modern day psychological astrology is kind of, as Stephen mentioned earlier, I think, going towards the transcending of polarity. Is that right, Stephen? Am I describing it correctly? Which is why we're more looking into the archetypal division of 12 in the zodiac, and that's why we have like 12 houses and not 8 houses in the usual system.
Well, I can't answer that directly. It's kind of open-ended, but again, it gets back to the mandala itself and why are there 360 degrees in a circle? And getting back to it was the Egyptians who basically set up the house systems, and then that was kind of incorporated in the Western Hermetic tradition, of course, which was back to the Kabbalistic point of view and the Sephiroth, and you have the 5, 7s, and 12s kind of working together. Because again, you get it in the Chinese astrology, and then you're going to be on the system of 8 rather than 12.
Mm-hmm. And is it not in Vedic as well? At least in the past, the lunar mansions were more basic for probably the first time people conceived the notion of houses. Was more to do with following the moon through the month and dividing the whole wheel into the lunar mansions more than zodiac signs. Did you find it, Gaurav?
Yes, of course. Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Yes, right about here. Here we go. So this is the diagram of a North Indian Vedic chart. The very basic thing about this is the ascendant is always fixed. It is the first house is always fixed, where you are watching the number 1. This is the first house. Now we have the zodiacs, which are moving across every house, not the houses. The houses are fixed. Just like in the circular chart, you have the MC and IC, which is fixed. Mm-hmm. So we also have the, I think that this would interest Laureen a little bit more. The Vedic chart, the ascendant is very much fixed. Mm-hmm. So this is how we use a Vedic chart.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
Any more question about that? Laureen wanted to see how it is. So this is the first house. This is the second house. The third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth.
Is there any reason for the movement of that you go to the left side, looking at it, and the 2 is above, or the 3 goes
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Zigzag.
It is very useful. It is very useful when we are using the aspects of planets. In fact, there are multiple, there are different kind of principles which we use. There are different techniques which are assigned to houses and zodiacs. Okay, let me tell you in a very simple way. The Aries, the elements of the zodiac sign. We have divided the elements into fiery, earthy, and airy and watery. So it becomes very easy to relate to the opposition of the signs. Let's say this is the ascendant and this becomes the descendant. This is your the 10th house is your midheaven, what we call here, and this is the IC, right?
Thank
Hello.
you.
So in this chart, it becomes very easily to relate to yourself, and this is being the 7th house definitely represents your spouse. So the relation of the 1-7 axis becomes very helpful while analyzing this chart. There are many other different principles and techniques which are used in this, which are easy to use in this chart, and especially when we are talking about the aspects of planets, and even going to the spiritual level of the person, how it is going to behave. So let's say the cluster is the cluster. There is a cluster of planets, and uh, it's kind of making a formation in some different part of the horoscope. That will definitely signify something else. If it is in making if there is a cluster in the 3rd house rather than the 9th house, the person will be more action oriented rather than the spiritual incline. If there is a more of a cluster around the 9th house, then there is more of spiritual inclination in that person. So I mean, these are very rough explanations, but there is way too much detail into that.
Okay, thank you, Gaurav. This very much resembles the wheel, but if we imagine the ascendant is on the place where we normally see the MC, and otherwise it's the same because we've got the same sequence, isn't it? 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 4 is a bit more accentuated to mark the fact that this is the IC, isn't it?
Sorry, come again.
I think somebody's phone. All right. How is the sound now?
It's okay.
Good.
Okay.
So,
Right.
great. So, if I understand it correctly, 1, 4, 7, and 10 are the angular houses.
Yes,
Obviously.
exactly.
So that's why those kind of diamonds are actually larger.
Mm-hmm.
To emphasize that.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that explanation. I've seen the chart before, but I've never understood it. So thank you very much.
Me too. This is the first time I really get this.
And I wanted to ask you, started to talk about the elements. Could you point out where that there isn't something about this chart about the elements? Is there? That the elements would be. Is there anything you started to say something about that? Could you? I missed what you were trying to say. Like watery, you were talking about the watery something. And this was for Gaurav.
Yeah,
Gaurav.
I'm going to unmute you now, Gaurav. Go ahead. Yes. Your mic is off.
Okay.
Yeah, now
Yes.
it's off.
Okay. Yes. Okay. This is the chart. It is in 2 languages. It's one in English and one in Hindi, which we use for ourselves for teaching our students here. So basically there is no division of houses. There is a division of zodiac signs into elements. The Aries is a fiery sign. If you can clearly read this, I
Yes.
hope the slide is visible clearly. The Taurus is earthy, the Gemini is airy, and the Cancer is watery. So in order, they are again falling in the same order. So that cycle for the first sign, the second sign, the third sign, and the fourth sign is repeating in the fifth sign, the sixth sign, the seventh sign, and the eighth sign. Then again in the ninth sign, the 10th sign, the 11th sign, and the 12th sign. Now, how do we relate these? Like if you see these fiery signs, they fall in a trine. These are trines to each other. Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. In a triangular shape in a North Indian chart. The chart I recently presented.
Yes, Gaurav, I think Lauren was asking how this element thing is represented in the chart itself. Is that right, Lauren?
Yes.
Yes, he's coming to it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That. I'm sorry, I was not prepared for this presentation. Okay. So this is the natural chart, what we call. So these zodiac signs, again, the first one is going to be fiery. The Taurus is going to be earthy. The Gemini is going to be airy, and the Cancer is again going to be watery. Then again, the cycle repeats: fiery, earthy, airy, and watery. Now, what happens here for us is that the ascendant. This is going to be this house. This house is the ascendant. This is fixed. Our zodiac signs are moving. So let's say there is the next zodiac sign, that is Taurus here. So now we have an earthy sign in the ascendant. For a Gemini ascendant, this is going to be the ascendant. So this is a Gemini ascendant. Now we have an airy zodiac sign as an ascendant. That is how we compare it. So now what is the qualities we use for these signs? It's very easily explainable in Vedic. Now for the coming back to the fiery sign. So fire is basically associated with heat, and we use it as we relate it to energy. So if we have a fiery ascendant, if there is a fiery zodiac sign in the ascendant, then the person, and definitely if the ascendant is a strong ascendant, the person will be energetic. The person will be more of he can in a negative sense he will be more aggressive, but in a positive sense he will be more energetic, associated with his practical abilities. He will have more of harmony in tandem to his actions of body. He will be more action oriented. That is how we will relate it to being a fiery sign. The negative aspect becomes he will be more aggressive. He will become more of dominant and everything like that. But with the earthy sign in the ascendant, we simply say that Earth as a matter, Earth is the most stable thing we see ourselves as. I mean, definitely there is no limit to the soul of a human being, because there is no boundaries for a soul to travel all across the universe. But when we come down to the material body, a material body definitely needs earthy platform to be there. Without Earth, without the stability of the Earth, there is no practical human life possible. So that simply represents a basic trait of Earth, that is stability, and the negative aspect of it becomes rigidity. So if the ascendant is strong in a positive way, it will represent stability in the person. And on the contrary, if it has a negative impact, it will represent rigidity in the person. So I hope I'm just not boring you guys with this. If you can get this, then I'll take you to the rest of the elements.
It is sounding like the same way we normally look at the positive, negative qualities of a particular sign, how they can manifest. So yeah, but it's so interesting to see that chart, because I am personally very new to that way of presenting charts.
And since we only have 2 more to go to air and water, please continue, I think. How about other people? I like it.
We are going through the zodiac signs, and I mean, you would like to look at the 4 elements and how they can be, you know. Yeah. I mean, if you want, yes, Gaurav, just let me see how we are.
All right then. So I'll continue with the next zodiac sign, that is Gemini for the ascendant. Now Gemini is again an Aries sign, but don't forget that we have 3 Aries signs. We have Gemini, we have Libra, and we have Aquarius as Aries signs. Both of, all of these different signs as Aries signs in the ascendant will show different kind of possibilities as well. The incremental level of the element changes with the increment of the zodiac sign in the ascendant. So coming back to the Aries sign in the ascendant, now air is an element. We all know that we can feel the air, we can feel the fan moving, we can feel the air over our skin, but we definitely can. What we cannot do is see the air. Now, if we correlate it in the correlate it with a human entity, how do we see that element within the human body? So we already know that our brain functions over a lot of things. It works with air, it works with the electrical impulses as well. But air is oxygen. We already know that our brain needs a lot of oxygen because everything with the Vedic is scientifically based. I don't want to go into the elongated part of it, but yes, we all know that oxygen is a part of the brain that is very much needed to keep it alive, and a lot of interactions in the brain are happening because of the air. So we straight away relate it to the thought part of a human brain. So being an airy element, because since air is not visible, so isn't the thought. We can see a person in physical way, but we cannot assess that person until and unless that person shares his or her thoughts with us. That is when we define what kind of a person he or she is. So thought is something which is which cannot be seen, but it can be perceived. That is how air is. So what is now associated with the thought? The creative part is very much associated with the airy element. So all the creatives, all the fields which need creation, like painting, like a painter. A painter. The painting is not right there on the canvas. The painter imagines that painting in the head and projects it onto the canvas. Now that is a process of airy element. Even for actors, even for any creative field, be it decorator, be it anything. So for all the creative fields, airy element becomes of great importance.
So in Vedic astrology, you are relating these processes to the air element and not to the fire element? Is that what you said?
No. Because fire is the intrinsic heat in the body. We need fire. We need heat in our body to digest the food. We straight away associate the fire with the element of the sun, with the element of the Mars. That is how we relate it. We simply relate it. We look at the fire. Basically in Vedic astrology, everything is very much in tandem to the observation what we see in the element.
Okay. Yes. So basically, with you, then the fire element is more actional, as far as I understand, more Martian, while the airy element is more creative. There is something to do with air in Western, with fire in Western astrology, which is to do with the creative imagination. So it's not just about action, like in Aries Mars, but more talking about Leo and Sagittarius going in this direction. It's this idea in the imaginative, intuitive mind that is, birthing something that then becomes a work of art or some sort of, all those things that you just talked about. So it's interesting.
Definitely.
But you take it more as a natural element, like what the element does in nature, and that's how you extract the meaning of the effect.
Yes. See, even for the elements, the harmony is between airy element and fiery element. If see, to burn for the fire to burn in a right way, a right amount of air is needed. If you cut out the air, the fire will diminish. If
Yes.
you blow the air out too strong, the fire may kind of spread and burn other things.
Yeah.
But the fire and the air, they go in tandem. And the earth, since if we pour, like you definitely have like what do you call it, a flower pot. You pour water in the in the earth, it retains the water. So earth and water go hand in hand, and fire and air go hand in hand. If you put water to the fire, definitely there is a conflict of elements there.
Yes.
So wherever in the horoscope we see a conflict of elements, that is where the trouble is.
Yes, yes, there is. I mean, this could be a topic of its own. I think we've done something similar, but we can do one on elements, on the elements in astrology. Stephen Arroyo is a big authority in that, in his book of the four elements, which really gives all those examples that you just mentioned, Gaurav, about what happens to each one of them out there in nature if you mix them, and how when you mix them in a good proportion, they help each other. But when one is excessive, it prevents the other from from doing its task and whatever. It's even compatible elements like earth and water. If you have too much earth add that to the water, then the water is lost and it's absorbed by the earth. If you have too much water, then the earth is getting eroding and swampy and so on. But that's a whole of a different topic, which we diverged a little bit on. But it's very interesting. If you guys are interested in this, we can have a separate talk if you want on the elements in astrology and look at them comparatively in Vedic and in Western as well. Shall we?
If you just,
I would
if
love
you
to-
just, yes. You just asked the question. I say yes. Elements, please.
And I would ask Gaurav just to tell us what is the negative of the air. What you said.
Yes. I was about to come to that.
Okay. Yeah, please finish off, Gaurav. Yeah.
So the airy element, the positive side of the airy element is to be more creative, but it is to imagine. Basically, it is to imagine. The imaginative skill of these zodiac signs, the Gemini, the Libra, and the Aquarius, are way too high. For Aquarius, it is more of spiritual. For Libra, it is more of practical and material. And for Gemini, it's in a way of development to reach there. If you see the the Gemini, the Libra, and the Aquarius, they are kind of in a form of triangle shape.
Mm-hmm.
So even I mean, there are many analogies attached to it. Fire has the ability to bring you up, but water has the ability to bring you down, because water always falls downward, it never rises. But fire, no matter how you light it up, it will always try to surface upside. So I mean, there are different analogies. So coming back to the negative aspect of this sign, so it is more of intuition, it is more of creativity. But the negative aspect is, if there is too much of emphasis of air in a negative way, then the person becomes kind of a daydreamer. The imagination takes over the logical aspect of human brain. So he becomes more of a daydreamer. And even if it is going further into negativity, then definitely the person may start to hallucinate. That is how we define the illnesses in regards of medical aspect of a chart. It becomes very easy to define what illness the person may suffer in his life period. Then we have other system to define it when. But with the conflicts of element, it becomes very easy to find out what illnesses the person may suffer in his or her life tenure. So I hope the negative aspect is clear. Shall I move to the last one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So if there is Cancer in the ascendant, which is a watery sign, now don't forget that Cancer Scorpio, and Pisces. All these are watery signs. So water. Now, what is the basic trait of water? The basic trait of water is fluidity. It is, we call it a fluid. Another word to watery substances is fluid. Now, the property of a fluid is that it doesn't has any shape of itself. It takes the shape of the vessel. Otherwise, it keeps the property of water is it keeps changing its shape. So, I mean, we all know that water travels from the sea into the sky, and from the sky it goes to the forms a cloud, and then rain, and then maybe ice, and then eventually turning into the rivers, and then again, even if you have water, you put it in a glass, it will take the shape of glass. If you put it in a different vessel, it will take the shape of that vessel. So, what is the problem with the water is that it is constantly flowing. There is no stability to it. So the mind for the watery ascendant people, there is more fluidity, there is more motion, excess of motion. So water can be associated with motion, and if there is excess of motion, we simply stated that there can be fickleness of the mind. There will be trouble deciding or sticking to one part or one aspect of life. I mean, they can be, you can be talking to a watery sign person at one point of time, but he may be thinking of something other, and he may constantly be changing the subjects. He may constantly change the subject. Now, that is the negative aspect of it. Now, what is the positive aspect of it? By application, by guidance. You pour water, water is poured by somebody in a vessel. That is how it is. Basically, watery ascendant people need direction. If they are given, directives and direction, just like water being put in a vessel, then they serve the purpose very efficiently. They become a master of that trade. They become the master of whatever. You basically, watery sign people need guidance. If they are unguided, they will constantly flow and become fickle-minded. But if they are guided, so basically, watery sign people need channelizing. And in regards of medical astrology, it is very, 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 very easy. With the watery element, having a conflict, the watery aspect of body. Now, that is blood and other watery fluids in the body. There is issue and troubles in regards of that. If there is disbalance of watery element in the horoscope, then definitely two things will happen over a period of time with the person. One, there will be the retainment of water in the body, eventually resulting into gain of weight gradually with the age. And other aspect of it, that the person may suffer from watery illnesses in the body. So that is how we associate somewhat. This is just a brief explanation of how we use the elements. I hope this was helpful.
Very much. Well, I was wondering, what ascendants do we all have here? Sveti, would you like to share our ascendants with each other to see how it's relevant to what you just explained to us?
Well, I was just about that. Yes, I was just saying that with my husband. We were just talking about that, about the Earth ascendant. Go on. Yes.
I just wanted to share water ascendant. It was like mind-blowing what you just said. It's like a total description of who I am. I'm a Scorpio ascendant.
Scorpio ascendant.
Yep. And generally, I have lots of water planets in the chart, including Moon, Sun, Mercury, etc., and so on. Many of them.
And how does that relate to your life?
Well, I always need someone to guide me. Otherwise, I get lost into everything I do. I get so scattered. My energy is like Gaurav explained. It's like I am able to fill any container that comes, and it's not productive at all. I need someone to guide me all the time. That's why I'm always in some kind of courses, because I need someone to guide me. Otherwise, I really lose it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. It was so to the point. Thank you so much for this. I never thought of this like that. Thank you.
Water is very adaptive, isn't it? My chart is also very watery, but it's so adaptive, so really accepting the circumstances and trying to adjust to whatever is there. It's a feminine kind of energy. Um, okay, well, Stephen,
But I would like to add to this
yes.
that if you cast a Vedic chart for your birth details, that is the ascendant that you get with a Vedic chart will be more precise, because we get a difference of one zodiac sign when we are casting a chart with the with other house systems. That
You use
most.
sidereal?
Sorry,
You
come
said
again.
real.
Do you use sidereal?
Yes.
Yes, because then I will be Libra ascendant. But I don't know. I relate so much to this water element.
Mhm.
Well, I'm again repeating what I said. You have to cast a Vedic chart for yourself. Then that is when these elements will actually show their impact. There is a possibility, since you are telling that it is airy, it could be that there may be a conflict of elements with the planets and the
I
zodiac
see.
signs.
Okay.
May I ask you also if I've seen Southern Vedic and Northern Vedic chart doing, and how does that relate?
They both are same. They both are same. Only the diagram is different.
Okay, the same, but just the outline, just the way it looks.
Yes, the diagram is only different, but everything is same.
Thank you.
If you want, I can show you the diagram as well. I have the Vedic diagram as well.
So what is this really about? Calculating the chart for the southern and northern hemisphere? Is that what you guys are talking
No,
about?
they both are kind of same. They both are same. If you want, I can show you the
They're
chart.
styles. It's a style of presentation difference,
Yes.
I believe.
Yes.
Not having to do with north or south hemisphere, but styles.
No. There are no hemispheres in that. It's just a
That's
way
what
of.
I'm just readily
I
asked. So
think we're all getting very confused now what exactly we're talking about. So what was the question again, Lauren? There were two different, if you can just be a bit more specific for those people that don't know, because most of us don't know Vedic.
Here we go. She's showing you. This is the other way, that this is either northern or southern. So it's a different diagram in which a chart looks, and this is the other way.
So there are two styles of presenting charts in Vedic.
Exactly.
Yes. These are different styles of presenting the chart.
Okay.
I didn't know that ahead of time. That's why I asked, was there something with the houses that is different, or is it different? And the answer he's showing us is that it's simply a diagram difference.
The only difference between a North Indian diamond style chart, which I showed earlier, and the South Indian chart, is that in the North Indian chart, your houses are fixed and zodiacs are moving. But in a South Indian chart, zodiacs are fixed in this rectangular box. Your houses will shift depending on which ascendant you have. The ascendant will become the first house.
So in that second one, the houses are more important than in the other one. Is that right?
I mean, we don't relate it that way. We simply relate it in the way of diagrams, because the analogy and the principle of analysis are absolutely same.
Okay, so it's just in the different parts of the country, you have a different style of projection chart.
Absolutely. Like we otherwise we are using usually this is how I would present the difference of a circular chart and a Vedic chart. This is how I would differentiate.
Okay, yeah, that's very, very interesting illustration. Gaurav, could you show us again, if that's not very difficult for you, when you did the first presentation, could you show us that slide where you were having the
Yes,
Taurus.
yes. I need to get my wired headphones. If you wait for a minute, because my wireless headphones are run out of batteries,
Okay,
and I'm not
okay.
able to hear. I need to get the wireless
Yeah, no problem.
headphones.
I would explain what I was trying to get to. One thing that Gaurav showed us in the beginning, remember that Taurus that was disappearing in the houses. In one of those charts that he had as an example. This is what we call intercepted sign, isn't it, in Western astrology, where in one house we've got the entirety of one sign, and maybe Gaurav will be able to explain. I think he said that in this case, this sign becomes less important, almost like it's missing from the picture, from the scheme. While in Western astrology, something is really, yeah, now I hope the sound is better. So in Western astrology, what we interpret an intercepted sign as is something actually more important as a factor, right? Than the other way around. I think that's one difference between the two. Gaurav, can you hear me? Yeah, let me unmute you because there was some problem with your
Yes.
sound. Now?
I can hear you now.
I was just hoping you can show us again that slide in your first presentation where Taurus was disappearing in the house.
Right.
Yeah. As I think this is interesting for everyone to take a look at as a contrast, as a contrast between your system and Western.
I wouldn't, place it like that, because you talked about the 10th, the mid-heaven. I hope you call the 10th house the mid-heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah. Similarly, in a cuspal chart, what we do is we first cast the mid-heaven, rather than with the help of the degrees of the ascendant. We cast the mid-heaven, then we cast the IC, and then eventually the rest of the houses. Then we have once we have the mid-heaven, then we also have the IC, and we are taking that in account. Since you are taking the perspective of a person's life being, kind of molded by the mid-heaven, we have a different, and in fact, I recall that Stephen was talking about the spiritual aspect of a human life, and a material and a metaphysical. I mean, if you talk about everything from the birth up till even beyond the birth, and even the cycles of reincarnation of a human being. For that, we have very simple analogy of using ascendant chart, a moon chart, ascendant chart for the physical aspect of a human life, the moon chart for a psychological aspect, and sun chart and for a spiritual aspect of a life, or the progress of a soul for the person.
Yeah, fine. Yes, I was actually referring to something different. I wanted to look at that situation that you showed us, where
yes, I'm
where
coming
one
down.
of the signs, when Aries was the beginning of the first house, and Taurus was entirely inside that first house as well. That particular case.
Okay, I believe this is the slide you were talking about.
Yes, that's exactly that. So what got me very interested in your presentation when we were talking before is that you said in this situation, and that's obviously a cuspal style chart, one of the cuspal style charts, which we have as so many different kinds in Western. But you're saying now Taurus is disappearing here. It's almost like this particular sign becomes less important, or kind of missing as a symbol from the chart. Was that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, well, what we do in Western is when we have something like this, where one sign of the zodiac appears to be entirely within one house, and no house starts from that sign or ends in that sign. Yeah, so it's called intercepted, and we have the opposite interpretation, that it's actually becoming a very important factor for the person, that one and the opposite one, because we're going to have the identical situation with the opposite sign. So here both Taurus and Scorpio will be intercepted in the houses. And as far as I know, and the way I interpret it, maybe there are other interpretations. Intercepted signs are really important signs, ones that actually are already kind of developed more in that case, in that person, instinctively, naturally, and with even though we don't have a cusp of a house concentrating on them, almost like the cusps of the houses are points in the zodiac where we need to do work, where we need to explore something, something needs to happen, while the intercepted ones are ones that are already something that we are familiar with. Do you guys have another view on
In fact, I believe the view is similar, but interpretations can be different. For us, again, it is the same thing. What you are telling, the Taurus will definitely be the disappearing sign, and also Scorpio will be the disappearing sign. The seventh sign from the sign which is disappearing also disappears in the chart.
Yeah.
And not to mention these signs, again, I mentioned this while presenting this, that this disappearing sign becomes very important along with the sign which has more impact, because the disappearing sign will show the lack of things in your life.
Mm-hmm.
The zodiac sign which diminishes in the horoscope, it's kind of eloped. You do not have those options in
Yeah,
your life.
exactly. That's
So it is
the contrast. That in as far as I have, I mean, interpreted it. Maybe there are differences here. I don't know, but Western, I think, says exactly the opposite. That it's not something that's missing from your life, but the other way around. And it's something that's predominant. That sign is actually predominant.
And what I would say in it is it's not, it's that you were trying to say, I think, that it was so developed perhaps in a past life that it doesn't need to be accentuated in this life, but it's very strong because it's settled and developed.
I have heard and read this kind of interpretation. I don't know to what extent we can really be certain that that's the case, but
Yeah.
I thought maybe there is no right answer here. I was just curious because you mentioned this of pointing out to the intercepted signs, and maybe you guys will say what else you think about them and how we can interpret them, because they're a bit of a mystery to me as well. Is it something that's missing? Is it something that's what does it mean that no house starts from that sign? And that brings us back to the question of cusps, house cusps. How important is the degree of the zodiac that falls on the house cusps in a chart? Because if we have intercepted houses, intercepted signs, that automatically means that other signs will have more than one house starting from them. So in other signs, to compensate, we are going to have more than, for example, both of my 10th house and 11th house start from Aquarius. So I've got Aquarius represented twice in house cusps, and obviously Leo as well. And there are many, many cases like that, and they happen when you've got, on the other hand, intercepted signs in the houses.
Well, I can absolutely relate with the expansion of these houses over the Aquarius being expanded over the 10th and the 11th, regardless of being it the tropical side of it, and the Leo sign, because your 5th house definitely is associated with your expansion of your intelligence. It's definitely related to the realm of your reading of different subjects and the depth of your reaching your subject. So since it is expanded, definitely there is expansion. And I mean obviously you are studying this this subject to the extent where you are discussing it on an international platform. Definitely that sign is showing its part of exceeding it over other houses. And talking about the Aquarius zodiac sign, since I'm just talking about one trait, not the rest of it.
Yeah, that's we don't need to get specific into my particular case, because it was just meant for an example of how sometimes the house cusps represented in the same sign twice and things like that. So that may be worth exploring. Yes, yes, and arguably we can say that I may have needed to learn more about the Aquarius Leo axis, and that's why I've got it so represented in 4 different house cusps. But yeah, that's just I was just trying to point the attention to everyone to the way these things get distributed in the chart when we use one of the quadrant systems of
So
house division.
the fiery and the airy element are, kind of
Essentially.
becoming dominant.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of houses, yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, guys, I think we're getting now to over I mean the time that we had planned for today. So I guess you're already tired. Would you like to think about next week, what we're talking about next week, and then call it a day? Stephen, I can hear you. I see you want to tell me something, but okay, I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong button for your mic. Go ahead to unmute yourself.
Okay. All right.
Good.
I'd like to follow up what you were suggesting earlier about the quadrants and the angles, because what you were just referring to about yourself, about this double cusp with Aquarius and Leo, it goes back to the idea of the angles as the crosses. The cardinal crosses, the fixed crosses, and the mutable crosses.
Yeah.
And those, referring back to what Garev was referring to earlier, and also for Dwayne, the idea of themes presenting themselves, regardless of the style of how the numbers are crunched, there are themes that emerge. And by considering not only the primary quadrants of the IC, MC, ascendant, and descendant, but again the other crosses between the fixed and the mutable. That these suggest themes within a person's life. And I was just following up what you were referring to of yourself, and it seemed as if that was almost on the tip of your tongue.
Okay, well, great. So we are on the same page. Well, we can continue. I think this is going to be a great topic to continue with. What I'm thinking about is something like not just the 4 angles of the chart, but this cross that they represent. And for example, I would take my case as an example. There is a situation of a fixed cross, but that was not necessarily supposed to be the case. So all the 4 angles of my chart are fixed signs: Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius. But only a few minutes difference in the birth time would have resulted in the MC-IC axis being in Cancer, Capricorn instead of Leo, Aquarius. So it's only a very, very short, I mean, it was totally possible to be not a complete fixed cross, but to have a representation of fixed signs and cardinal signs at the same time. So this is something very person specific. This is something that is so dependent on our exact time of birth, which then constructs the chart and in these 4 angles. And it becomes the basis of the personality, as Roger makes a point to as well. So what I would suggest, if you want to have that topic, is maybe to give personal examples from our chart, show the chart and say, okay, that's my ascendant, descendant, MC, and IC. And that's how I see the cross of reincarnation in my particular case, as a represented energies. Would you like to do that?
Yes.
And
I
don't,
love
Yeah.
practical
Yes.
application.
and
It
make
helps me
really,
understand, to go personal. It's not that I need to know personally everybody's
Cross it.
business, but it's so helpful to have practical
Yeah.
application.
I agree, to make it more case study kind of thing next time. If you don't want to talk about your chart, if you don't want to share your chart, share the chart of someone else, the chart of a celebrity if you want, or whatever. As long as the example holds, yeah, of that.
And what code do we look for? We talk about the ascendant, the descendant, the IC, and the MC.
Mhm.
And then what are the angles that we look for?
I think we can concentrate on the actual horizon meridian in the chart. These are always 2 sets of opposite signs, but it's so specific depending on the chart what these two pairs of signs are. In my case, they're Scorpio, Taurus, and Leo, Aquarius. But you know, every case is different, and it's so interesting to see how those combinations may be working in your life. Yeah, your you know, axis of power and axis of consciousness. What are they in your case, or the case that you want to look at?
And one last thing I'd like to say is thank you for that definition on the end of Dane Ridger's book. That was the per ignum ad lucem, through the fire to the light. It's so beautiful. I'd like to contemplate that.
Yes, thank you, Sveti, for that.
Oh, very welcome.
So, yeah, if you wish, that could be a good way to also to get each other, to get to know each other better. That's more improvised way of discussing things next time, because we can see each other's charts as well in that way. But really focusing on the angles and on the meridian and horizon. At the end of Rudyard's book, The Astrological Houses, there is an overview of that, of the pairs. And I think we can use that as a basis, as that's really good interpret. And it's pretty short, so you don't need to do a lot of reading. If you're interested, I really recommend that. Stephen Arroyo also has in one of his books a walk through the pairs of signs. And also, I think Tracy Marks had something in one of her books. So yeah, whatever you want to do, but I believe that's a very connected topic to the one we had today.
Good. Thank you. Have a good
Sounds
trip
great.
to Bulgaria.
Oh, thank you so much. I believe my internet is going to be much better in Bulgaria, as it's
Are
usually.
you coming to Bulgaria?
Yes. Shall we see each other?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I would love to. Please call me.
You two, give me your number after that, so you know.
I will send you a personal message on Facebook.
Yes, I look
Oh,
forward.
great. I'm so happy. Looking forward to it.
Me too. Me too.
Great.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for today. Thank you, Gaurav, for all the input you gave us. You've opened the door to Vedic astrology, which is so new to us, to me at least. I don't know, others may know more. And I hope to see you all next time again.
Thank you. Have a
Bye.
great week.
Look forward. This time I'm a bit late with the recordings, because I would wait until I'm back to Valencia to properly do them and cut them and so on. But yeah, that will be uploaded eventually.
Thank you for all your behind-the-scenes work on our behalf.
Thank you, Dwayne. You also do a lot of behind-the-scenes work, as I can see. So very appreciated.
If you need any support, I volunteer as well, so don't hesitate.
Thank you, Sveti. Well, you can come in and present something in any of the next sessions.
I was thinking about the floating MC.
Oh yeah, that's
because I have some observations and some experience, and I think I have some thoughts to share if the others are interested.
And they're both.
I am.
Okay, I can make a few slides and just share some thoughts.
Go ahead. Yeah,
Okay, will do.
that would be great.
Great.
Bye,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone. Have a
All
good
right.
day or evening. See you
too.
next time.
Bye.
Okay. Take care.
Travel
Thank
safe.
you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.